Good afternoon, dear colleagues. I am Strigin Mikhail. I am PhD and Master of Philosophy. My work is called The Uncertainty Principle of Logic or Quantization of Semantics. Just a moment, I will switch on my screen. We will talk about the evolution of the a priori. This is a kind of paradox, since the a priori is as if a time invariant. I use the diagram method in my work. It's not new and has already been used several times. For example, by Nicholas of Cusa, Gottfried Wilhelm Leibniz, Edmund Husserl, and others. Spinoza wrote that he was going to study human patience geometrically. I will try to use diagrams to study the semantic space or the space of meaning. I'll start with the diagram of being truth. This diagram appeared while reading Wittgenstein's Tractatus Logica Philosophicus. It is a mathematical image of his thought that tautology and contradiction are not pictures of reality. They do not depict any possible situation because the first allows for any possible situation and the second none. This is how extreme poetry and ancient philosophy can be characterized. The dotted line pressed to the f-axis shows how the symbolic form is born singularly, poetically. At the beginning, the falsity of the form is equal to infinity, while its truth is equal to zero. The solid line surrounded by an ellipse shows a life symbolic form in science when truth increases and falsity decreases. The dotted line pressed to the t-axis shows how it becomes a culture layer in philosophy. Any new symbolic form is born as a poetic contradiction to the existing symbolic system. Later it becomes possible with a certain probability. This probability is gradually increasing. The symbolic form becomes scientific and further turns into a philosophical tautology. Scientists often criticize poetry for a freedom of expression. They do not notice how poetic symbolic form becomes scientific discourse. String theory, for example, means that a material world is music. Entropy manifests itself in the transformation of the individual into the plural, the poetic into the philosophical. Hegel drew attention to the reverse anti-entropic process of transforming the plural into the individual. Prigogine to prove that as a scientific fact. To counter process must also exist in the semantic space, the entropic process of decay of symbolic form and anti-entropic process of generating new poetic images. The second diagram demonstrates such a recovering of the form of epistemology. It demonstrates the anti-entropic process of growth of knowledge and the connecting between science and philosophy. The oblique shading shows the area of rational judgments, which in Kant definitions correlates with science. The vertical shading shows the area of philosophy, and the quintessence of such a triangle is poetic speculation. The circle denotes the synthesis of a new a priori or a new model of world. The word model refers to some symbolic form, for example, Lobachevsky model of geometry, or a model of a new airplane. The dialectical circle of epistemology lies in the fact that philosophy builds a basis through poetry. Science builds in its theories using the cognitive nature of this basis. Philosophy takes the results of these theories to the utmost abstraction. This allows you to change the basis. A new scientific axiomatics appears in this way. The circle transforms into a spiral. The infinity of the growth of knowledge is confirmed by Gödel's second theorem on the incompleteness of any logic above the first order. This theorem states that we will either arrive at improvable propositions or contradictory ones. Kolmogorov wrote how to get out of this situation. It's necessary to accept an approvable axiom as a basis. Hintika drew attention to the fact that the construction of any theory consists of two groups of judgments. It's very important. Some relate to the modeling of the theory, other to its logic. He criticized Gödel for not distinguishing between them. This situation is similar to the situation in classical mechanics. The phase space of the evolution of any entity consists of coordinates and impulses. A model of a theory is its coordinates in semantic space. The logic of a theory is the impulse responsible for its dynamics and evolution. In other words, the axioms of the model are the start of our trajectory of thinking, way of thinking, and the axioms of logic are the function that determines the formation of the trajectory or way of thinking. Incompleteness is possible both within the model and within the logic applied to it. This is incompleteness of a different nature. Hintika calls the first semantic completeness and the second deductive completeness. This incompleteness in quantum mechanics is expressed in the uncertainty principle, which can be depicted in a diagram. The square outlines the incompleteness of the coordinates or the model theory, and the dotted line are the incompleteness of the impulse or the incompleteness of logic, different direction, how we can see. Thinking as a process of generation information in a wave process. Hegel made this clear by showing the dialectical nature of thinking. Wave and dialectics are synonyms. But the uncertainty principle is ontological for wave mechanics. So Hegel was the first to applicate the principle of uncertainty, presenting evolution in the form of a dialectical spiral. We can see it in the following diagram. Next, an important diagram of the evolution of an arbitrary theory. It was born from the famous Frege diagrams. The triangle represents the ambiguity of constructing judgments. It primarily demonstrates the dynamics of speech, the linear relationship in intention vector between the signified and the signifier, meaning and sign, is stratified from a one-dimensional to a three-dimensional relationship. Each additional coordinate temporarily transforms the relationship along the other two axes. Gilles Deleuze developed this idea and showed that an arbitrary sentence of language contains three types of relations: designation, manifestation, and signification. First is about of an object. The second is the relationship of the sentence to the subject who speaks. The third is the influence of the narrative of the text, but the narrative of the narrative is the logic of the text. The attitude to the subject is the model of speaker. Finally, it is a manifestation of the self. So definitions Deleuze and Frege are isomorphic. This can be depicted in the following uncertainty diagram of logic by connecting Hintiki duality and Fregean triality. Here I am the subject rotating the spiral of thinking. L, logic of text construction. M is a model of this object discussed in the theory. Gödel wrote about optimizing the balance of maximal and minimal axiomatics. We propose a formula for this optimization, this formula. By analogy with the uncertainty principle in the following form: delta M multiplied delta L equal H, where M is the theory model and L is the logic used. H is a human. We formulate the following lemma: the quantum of symbolic noise is the human. It is a principle of indeterminacy of the symbolic. If small letter h characterizes uncertainty in the real, small h mean a constant of Planck, while capital letter h with means human is uncertainty in the semantic space. The principle of least action is always implicit in any thinking structure. Gödel expressed this in the need for some balance of maximal and minimal assumptions in the axiomatics. This can be considered an analogy of Occam's razor in the construction of the axiomatics of model of being and logic. The idea can be expressed differently. In mathematics, in an arbitrary n-dimensional space, you can find many different vectors, but only n of them will be independent and form of basis. Similarly, within the framework of a certain model, you can find n independent judgments that form a basis from axioms in this model. Such a metaphor has every reason to be considered a lemma. In the semantic space, there is a certain dimension determined by the number of independent orthogonal axioms. Then again, using geometry and the idea of basis, we arrive at the final important diagram. The mechanism for the formation of analytical judgments is shown in the first figure. Kant defined such judgments as propositions where the predicate does not add to the meaning of the subject. The direction of predicate B and subject are parallel, and therefore the total vector of the judgment is almost collinear with the vector of subject A. A triangle degenerates into a straight line if the predicate is strictly parallel to the subject. Judgment turns into movement along a straight line of the subject. This does not add meaning, since the straight line only generates a tautology. The construction of synthetic judgments is shown in figure 2. The subject and predicate vectors are orthogonal. Kant defined synthesis as the joining of different ideas to each other and the understanding of their diversity in a single act of cognition. The nature of the predicate and subject of synthetic and analytical judgments is the same, this and this. The third type of judgment is synthesized from a predicate and an argument which have a different nature. It's very important. We call such judgments topological. An example of all three types of judgments: soft cotton wool, artificial cotton wool, and cotton candy. A topological judgment appears when the function of thinking passes through 0. The idea of torus is not derived by Kant's synthesis from the idea of a sphere. We can only get it with the help of such a topological transition. This birth of knowledge occurs in the synthesis of previous a priori knowledge and nothing. Sphere and 0 equal torus. It's very important. But only the subject can bring knowledge through nothingness. So the main feature of topological judgments is that we connect categories of different natures. We seem to be moving from one semantic variety to another, and the semantic vectors connecting the two categories is not continuous. Or does it become like this only in a larger context, where these varieties can somehow be stitched together? In addition, such stitching makes it possible to bring different categories closer together and further evolution tautologies the judgment. For example, the categories time and money in the past, before the appearance of their common context, were almost unrelated. But after his appearance, the judgment time is money gradually become tautology. The performed procedure gives rise to a symbolic of a different topological complexity, just as a flower grows at one of the levels of the fractal structure of a tree. Thanks for the attention. I wish all participants of Congress good luck.